The day had started unremarkably. The sun filtered lazily through the city streets, bouncing off the worn pavement as he walked toward the apartment building. The 22-year-old man felt the familiar pull of nerves that always accompanied new beginnings. The lobby smelled faintly of polish and vanilla, a mixture that seemed almost designed to soothe, but it did little to calm the fluttering in his chest. As he stepped inside, his eyes fell on her immediately. The landlady was a striking presence, a 40-year-old American Caucasian woman with long, black hair cascading past her shoulders, lightly tanned skin, and subtle freckles that caught the light just so. Her dark brown eyes held warmth and a hint of mischief, framed by soft laugh lines that hinted at years of experience and quiet joy. She stood behind the desk, curvy figure poised with graceful confidence, her attire, a fitted blouse and skirt, careful yet effortless. The sunlight streaming through the lobby windows illuminated her presence, making her feel larger than life, yet somehow intimate and accessible at the same time. The man's hands fumbled with the lease papers he had brought, crumpling the edges slightly from nervous tension. She noticed immediately, but didn't comment. Instead, her eyes followed him with a patience that was almost tangible, as if the rhythm of her gaze itself could steady his heartbeat. "I wasn't expecting anyone today," he said, his voice betraying a slight tremor. Her lips curved into a small, knowing smile. "Sometimes the unexpected is exactly what makes a day interesting," she replied, voice soft yet confident, each word carrying an undertone of curiosity that made the air between them feel charged. The man approached the desk, glancing down at the papers he was holding. Her fingers reached for them, brushing lightly against his. The contact was brief, but it sent a strange warmth through him, a quiet electricity that made his chest tighten. Her touch was delicate, purposeful, teasing in the way a glance can linger longer than expected. "You're here for the lease?" he asked, attempting to focus on the business at hand, though his mind had already drifted to the way her hair caught the sunlight, or the subtle tilt of her head that made her smile seem secretive, intimate. "Yes," he added, unsure why he felt compelled to confirm the obvious. Her eyes locked with his, dark and luminous, a playful glint sparking between them. "Well, sometimes the formalities can wait," she said, leaning slightly forward. The movement was small but deliberate, and the gentle scent of vanilla and jasmine drifted toward him. Perhaps tonight would be better. The words hung in the air, both tantalizing and disarming. The lobby, the papers, the ordinary rules, they all seemed suddenly insignificant. He realized, with a jolt, that the choice wasn't about paperwork or schedules. It was about connection, warmth, and a curiosity that neither had expected. He swallowed hard, caught between hesitation and intrigue, sensing that one night, one decision, could unfold into something entirely unexpected. And in that quiet, sunlit lobby, with her patient, teasing smile, the man understood that the ordinary had just been replaced by possibility, and nothing would ever feel the same again. After the initial, fleeting tension of the lobby, he followed her up the narrow staircase that led to the apartment. Each step creaked slightly under his weight, echoing in the bright, sunlit hallway. The 22-year-old man's pulse thrummed with anticipation, a nervous rhythm that made his senses acutely aware of every detail. Sunlight spilled through the tall windows, highlighting the warm tones of the wooden railing and casting subtle shadows along the walls. She moved with quiet grace, a 40-year-old American Latino woman with long black hair swaying lightly behind her, lightly tanned skin glowing in the morning light. Her dark brown eyes occasionally flicked over her shoulder, meeting his gaze with a soft, playful smile that made him forget the mundane purpose of his visit. Subtle freckles across her nose caught the sunlight, and the gentle lines at the corners of her eyes spoke of both experience and a life well lived. She wore a crisp white blouse tucked neatly into a beige skirt that moved fluidly with each step, her curvy figure balanced by the elegance of her posture. The man's own movements felt awkward in contrast. His shoulders tensed slightly with each step, fingers brushing against the railing as if seeking stability. He tried to focus on the paperwork tucked under his arm, yet his attention was drawn repeatedly to the way she walked, the quiet confidence she exuded, and the warmth that seemed to radiate from her presence. Every subtle glance she cast in his direction carried an unspoken message, teasing yet inviting, leaving him caught between hesitation and intrigue. When they reached the apartment door, she paused, her hand resting lightly on the polished doorknob. She tilted her head slightly, offering a faint, knowing smile that made his chest tighten. The air between them seemed to thrum with possibility, bright and charged, yet intimate and personal. "Here we are," she said softly, her voice carrying that subtle, magnetic warmth. "This is your space, if you're ready for it." The man hesitated, momentarily taken aback by the comfort and intimacy in her tone. There was no rush, no pressure, just an invitation that felt unusually personal for a simple lease visit. She pushed the door open, revealing a modest but sunlit apartment, its wooden floors polished and gleaming in the morning light. Sunlight poured through the large windows, illuminating every corner of the room and casting a warm, inviting glow over her poised figure. She stepped aside, gesturing subtly for him to enter first. Her presence, calm yet undeniably magnetic, made the ordinary apartment feel almost sacred, like a space curated for conversation, warmth, and connection. The scent of vanilla lingered softly in the air, accompanied by the faint aroma of fresh sunlight on clean wood. He walked inside, each step careful, as if moving through a fragile yet enticing world. She followed, her movement fluid and assured, fingers brushing lightly against the edge of the countertop as she moved past. The tension in the air was quiet but undeniable, a slow burn that wrapped around them like sunlight drifting through sheer curtains, bright, warm, and impossible to ignore. As he glanced around the apartment, the ordinary details, the neatly arranged furniture, the soft throw on the couch, the small potted plants by the window, suddenly felt layered with meaning. The space, and the woman who inhabited it, seemed to hold a promise of something unexpected, intimate, and quietly transformative. In that shared moment of proximity, he realized that this night, just hours away, might be far more than a lease signing. He stepped fully into the apartment, his eyes taking in the modest, sunlit space. Every detail seemed to hum with quiet warmth. The polished wooden floors reflected the morning light streaming through the windows, small potted plants added life to the corners, and a soft throw draped over the couch suggested someone who cared for comfort and aesthetics alike. The 22-year-old man's pulse raced, a nervous energy that made him acutely aware of her presence. She moved gracefully around the room. The 40-year-old American Caucasian woman with long black hair, lightly tanned skin, and subtle freckles radiating a calm, magnetic confidence. Her dark brown eyes met his occasionally, carrying a gentle warmth that made him feel both noticed and understood. Soft laugh lines at the corners of her eyes and the gentle curve of her lips added to her approachable, yet undeniably alluring, presence. She wore a fitted light blouse and beige skirt that accentuated her curvy figure, her posture elegant yet relaxed, inviting him into the space she clearly cherished. "Please, make yourself comfortable," she said softly, her voice carrying the subtle warmth of someone used to putting others at ease. Her hand brushed the edge of the couch as she gestured, a deliberate movement that drew attention to the inviting space. The 22-year-old hesitated, feeling the strange gravity of the moment. It was more than just entering an apartment. It was stepping into a world she had crafted, one imbued with her personality, her energy, and, unintentionally perhaps, her quiet allure. He sat carefully on the edge of the couch, straightening the papers in his hands more out of habit than necessity. The warmth of the sunlight on the floor made the space feel intimate, almost protective, as if the room itself was aware of the tension slowly building between them. Every small gesture she made, the slight tilt of her head, the way she rested her hand lightly on the armrest, the soft brush of hair from her face, seemed designed to draw his attention without overtly doing so. She moved toward the kitchenette area, casually arranging a few cups on the counter, the sunlight catching her long black hair as it shimmered behind her. Even the simple act of pouring water felt graceful, her fingers brushing lightly against the glass, the movement smooth and intentional. His eyes followed, mesmerized by the combination of elegance and understated strength in her actions. "Would you like some tea?" she asked, her voice soft and inviting, yet carrying a teasing undertone that made his chest tighten. The question, casual as it sounded, seemed layered with meaning. It wasn't about hospitality, it was about shared presence, about pausing together in a space that was theirs, however briefly. He nodded, suddenly aware of the subtle electricity in the air, the magnetic tension that made each small glance feel loaded. As she prepared the tea, he noticed the delicate lines at the corners of her eyes deepen slightly as she smiled to herself, the curve of her lips adding warmth to her already radiant presence. Every movement was precise, intimate, and strangely comforting, reinforcing the pull he felt toward her. In that sunlit apartment, filled with warmth, subtle scents, and quiet gestures, he realized that this encounter was no longer about the lease. It was about connection, about proximity, warmth, and the unspoken invitation she offered with every glance and every gentle gesture. The air between them was thick with possibilities, a slow-building tension that hinted at a night destined to change the ordinary into something quietly extraordinary. He sat on the edge of the couch, slightly tense, the stack of lease papers forgotten in his hands. The sunlight spilling through the windows warmed the room, highlighting the polished wood floors and the gentle curves of the furniture. Every detail felt infused with her presence. The 40-year-old American Latina woman, long black hair cascading over her shoulders, lightly tanned skin, subtle freckles catching the light, soft laugh lines framing her dark brown eyes, and the graceful curves of her figure, accentuated by the fitted blouse and skirt she wore. She moved with quiet elegance, stepping closer to adjust a throw pillow on the couch. The movement was casual, yet each gesture was purposeful, drawing his attention in ways he couldn't fully articulate. Her fingers brushed lightly against the fabric, close enough that he could sense warmth radiating from her skin. He felt an odd pull toward her, a mix of curiosity, hesitation, and something unspoken that made his chest tighten. "Let me make this feel more like home," she said softly, her voice carrying warmth and gentle amusement. She smiled, that quiet, knowing smile that made his pulse quicken, and the corners of her dark brown eyes crinkled in a way that made her seem approachable, yet mysteriously magnetic. He noticed the subtle freckles along her nose catching the sunlight, and the soft lines at the corners of her mouth, traces of her lived life and quiet beauty. She paused, standing close to the couch, and let her fingers brush a stray lock of hair from her face. The gesture seemed incidental, but to him it carried weight. The intimacy of shared space, the deliberate softness of her movements, the quiet authority she exuded without demanding it. The air between them was thick with a tension that wasn't spoken but felt with every breath, every glance. He tried to focus on the apartment itself, the polished wooden floor, the sunlight streaming through the windows, the gentle sway of the potted plants, but his attention kept drifting back to her. There was a magnetic warmth in her presence, a quiet steadiness that made him both anxious and strangely comforted. Every step she took, every subtle movement of her hands, seemed choreographed to hold him in the moment, to make him aware of proximity and possibility. "Would you like to sit somewhere more comfortable?" she asked, gesturing to a small armchair bathed in sunlight. Her voice was soft, inviting, yet carried a subtle, teasing undertone. He realized that the question wasn't just about the furniture. It was about presence, about closeness, about noticing her world and being noticed in return. He nodded, moving slowly toward the chair, acutely aware of the warmth radiating from her body, the faint scent of vanilla lingering in the sunlit air. Her gaze followed him, dark brown eyes, soft yet penetrating, watching each movement with quiet attentiveness. The tension between them was palpable, charged with unspoken curiosity and subtle desire, yet fully grounded in respect and emotional intimacy. As he sat, she returned to her place near the window, leaning slightly to arrange a small vase of flowers, her long black hair falling naturally over her shoulders. He felt a strange exhilaration in the ordinary act, as if every gesture she made, so simple, so natural, carried a meaning beyond words. In that bright, sun-filled apartment, every glance, every touch, every breath seemed heightened, setting the stage for a night where ordinary rules might quietly dissolve. The apartment felt smaller now, in the most intimate way possible. The 22-year-old man could feel the warmth of the sunlight on the polished wooden floor, but it wasn't the sun that made his chest tighten. It was her presence. The 40-year-old American Caucasian woman, long black hair cascading smoothly down her back, lightly tanned skin with subtle freckles, and curvy figure, moved through the space with a calm grace that seemed effortless. Her dark brown eyes, framed by soft laugh lines, followed him with a gentle attentiveness that made him feel simultaneously exposed and understood. He lingered near the small coffee table, unsure whether to focus on the lease papers or allow himself to notice her fully. She approached the couch, kneeling down lightly to adjust a throw pillow. The movement was casual, but each gesture seemed choreographed to draw his attention, the slight brush of her fingers against the fabric sending a ripple of warmth up his arm. He felt the slow pull of curiosity and hesitation, a tension that was more emotional than physical, yet entirely consuming. "Is this better?" she asked softly, straightening with a subtle sway in her posture. Her fitted blouse and skirt accentuated her curves without demanding attention. It was a natural elegance, one that made him acutely aware of her confidence and quiet charm. Her dark brown eyes held a gentle sparkle, teasing yet reassuring, as if she understood exactly what effect she had on him and chose not to exploit it overtly, but rather invite him into the moment. He nodded, words momentarily failing him. The sunlight streaming through the windows caught her long hair, highlighting subtle streaks of brown, and the faint scent of vanilla lingered in the air, mingling with the warmth of the room. Each small detail, the soft rustle of her blouse as she moved, the tilt of her head as she glanced toward him, was heightened, a delicate dance of awareness and attraction, entirely subtle yet undeniably present. She walked past the coffee table toward the kitchenette, preparing a small cup of tea. Even in this simple act, he noticed the elegance of her movements, the gentle curve of her wrist, the careful placement of each cup, the way her posture balanced strength and grace. He realized that this intimacy wasn't about words. It was about proximity, gestures, shared space, and the quiet tension in each glance and movement. When she returned, handing him the cup with a small, inviting smile, he felt a jolt of nervous excitement. Their fingers brushed, a fleeting contact that sent warmth through him, the kind of subtle yet electrifying connection that made ordinary moments feel charged. Her dark brown eyes met his, soft and patient, as if giving him permission to stay present, to notice, to be drawn in. Sitting across from her, he became hyper-aware of the apartment's quiet details, the light bouncing off the wooden floor, the gentle sway of the potted plants, the way the sunlight illuminated her face. Every glance between them carried weight, a slow burn of emotional tension that neither forced nor rushed. He understood, in that bright, intimate room, that this night was already different. It was a threshold, a quiet invitation to something unexpected, tender, and profoundly human. The apartment had grown warmer, not just from the afternoon sun spilling through the windows, but from the quiet presence of her. The 22-year-old man sat across from the 40-year-old American Latino woman, her long black hair catching the light, lightly tanned skin glowing subtly, and curvy figure poised with natural elegance. Her dark brown eyes held a mix of attentiveness and gentle amusement, the soft lines at the corners hinting at a life rich with experience and warmth. Each small gesture, tucking a stray lock of hair behind her ear, adjusting the throw on the couch, or leaning slightly forward, carried an intimacy that made him keenly aware of every heartbeat, every movement. She poured a small cup of tea, the delicate clink of the porcelain sounding unusually loud in the quiet room. The aroma of herbal notes mingled with the faint scent of vanilla lingering from earlier, creating a cocoon of comfort that made him feel both anxious and at ease. He reached for the cup, their fingers brushing lightly in a moment so brief it could have been missed, yet it carried a subtle electricity that made him inhale sharply. The warmth of her hand against his was enough to make him notice how small, subtle, and entirely human gestures could command attention and stir emotions. "Do you always make things feel so inviting?" he asked, his voice low, almost unsure. She smiled, dark brown eyes softening, laughter lines deepening with the genuine warmth of her amusement. "It's all about perspective," she replied, her tone calm, yet teasing, a mixture of patience and playful curiosity. She leaned slightly closer, long black hair falling around her shoulders, the sunlight catching it just right. The movement was natural, casual, yet charged with a quiet, unspoken intensity that made him aware of how small distances could feel immense and intimate at once. He felt the pull of the moment, the subtle tension that didn't need to be named. Her gaze held him, patient and knowing, and he realized that he wanted to stay in this suspended space a little longer, to let the ordinary rules of time and expectation dissolve. The lease papers he had carried in earlier now seemed trivial, irrelevant compared to the presence of someone who had, without trying, captured his full attention. She leaned back slightly, offering a gentle smile, her curvy figure poised gracefully on the edge of the couch. The sunlight danced across her lightly tanned skin, highlighting subtle freckles and soft contours. Her dark brown eyes seemed to read him in a way that was quiet but penetrating, acknowledging the hesitations and curiosities he had yet to express. The room, bright and warm, seemed to amplify every small movement. The tilt of her head, the subtle brush of her fingers across the tabletop, the softness of her voice. In that sunlit apartment, the space between them felt charged, not with urgency, but with the slow, building recognition of something tender and potentially transformative. Every glance, every fleeting gesture carried the weight of possibility. He understood, in a sudden clarity, that this night, whatever it became, was not about rules or leases. It was about shared moments, the intimacy of small actions, and the quiet invitation to trust someone enough to let ordinary time stretch and fold around them. The unspoken question hung in the warm air. How far would this night take them? And neither needed to speak it aloud to feel its gravity. The afternoon sun had softened into a golden glow, spilling through the windows and painting the apartment in warmth. The 22-year-old man sat quietly, still feeling the gentle pull of anticipation from the earlier moments. Across from him, the 40-year-old American Caucasian woman leaned slightly forward on the couch, her long black hair tumbling over her shoulders, lightly tanned skin catching the sunlight, and her curvy figure poised gracefully. Dark brown eyes met his with an intimacy that didn't need words. There was understanding, patience, and a quiet invitation in that steady gaze. The room itself seemed to breathe with them, bright and inviting, each detail emphasizing a domestic warmth. Polished wooden floors gleaming in the sun, small potted plants swaying lightly from the afternoon breeze, and a soft throw on the couch that begged to be touched. He became acutely aware of the subtleties of her presence, the faint scent of vanilla lingering in the air, the slight movement of her hands as she rested them lightly on her knees, the calm rise and fall of her chest as she breathed. Each gesture carried the weight of familiarity and the thrill of intimacy. "Do you feel at home here?" she asked softly, her voice carrying gentle warmth. She leaned a fraction closer, dark brown eyes locking with his. The question wasn't about furniture or space. It was about presence, about trust, and about allowing someone into a world they had built for themselves. He swallowed, caught between hesitation and courage, and nodded slightly. The proximity of her body, the subtle tilt of her head, and the warmth radiating from her made it impossible to think about anything mundane. He noticed the delicate laugh lines framing her eyes and the way her lips curved into that effortless, inviting smile. It was mesmerizing, a quiet magnetism that drew him closer without a single word of demand. She reached toward the small coffee table, retrieving a cup of tea with a natural elegance, her fingers brushing lightly against his as she passed it. The contact was fleeting, yet it sent a subtle warmth up his arm, anchoring the tension in a shared moment rather than letting it dissipate. He realized that their connection wasn't about words or gestures that could be labeled. It was about presence, attention, and the gentle merging of ordinary lives into an extraordinary shared space. For a long moment, they simply sat there, the sun casting golden patterns across the room. His chest loosened with a sense of quiet contentment he hadn't anticipated. The lease, the formality, the original purpose of his visit, it all felt secondary now. What mattered was the warmth between them, the subtle acknowledgement of feelings unspoken, and the trust that allowed them to exist in the same room with both curiosity and calm intimacy. Finally, she smiled, a soft, knowing curve of her lips that spoke of invitation and acceptance. The room seemed to brighten further, not from the sunlight, but from the unspoken understanding that lingered between them. In that bright, sun-filled apartment, they had transcended the ordinary, the rules, the expectations, and the constraints of time. The night ahead wasn't dictated by plans or leases. It was defined by presence, care, and the delicate, thrilling intimacy that comes from truly noticing another person. And in that golden afternoon light, he understood that the choice to stay wasn't just about a night. It was about embracing possibility, warmth, and connection in its purest form.